Racist cop pulls over black judge. What happens next is shocking. Judge Samuel Carr's fingers tightened around the leather steering wheel of his new Lexus as red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. The familiar streets of Winterdale, normally a sanctuary after long days at the courthouse, suddenly felt hostile and foreign. He hadn't been speeding. His judicial training had taught him to follow traffic laws meticulously. But something about this stop felt wrong. The officer's footsteps crunched on gravel, growing louder. Samuel's heart pounded as he reached for his credentials, catching the officer's reflection in his mirror. Officer RHS, her nameplate read, and her hand already rested too close to her weapon. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion, scanning him like a predator sizing up prey. This wasn't about traffic laws. This was about a black man in a predominantly white neighborhood in an expensive car. A neighborhood where Samuel had served as a judge for over a decade. As he rolled down his window, he knew this moment would change everything, not just for him, but for justice in Winterdale itself. Judge Samuel Carr had spent 15 years on the bench in Winterdale's courthouse, building a reputation for fairness and measured judgment that had earned him respect from most of the legal community. With its dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling windows, his corner office overlooked the manicured town square where he'd advocated for civil rights as a young lawyer before ascending to the judiciary. The new Lexus parked in his reserved spot was a hard-earned symbol of his success, a reminder of the distance he'd traveled from his childhood in South Chicago. At 53, Samuel carried himself with the quiet dignity his position demanded. His salt and pepper hair was always neatly trimmed, his suits precisely pressed, his timing punctual to the minute. The other judges called him the professor behind his back, a nod to both his methodical approach to the law and his habit of mentoring young attorneys, especially minorities trying to navigate a system that wasn't built for them. His wife Denise, a hospital administrator, often teased him about his obsession with order. Their modernist home in Winterdale's affluent Oak Hill neighborhood was his sanctuary, where every evening he would unwind with jazz playing softly as he reviewed case files. It was a life he'd built carefully, deliberately, proof that the system could work if you played by its rules. But lately, something had been gnawing at him. In his courtroom, he'd started seeing a pattern in the cases before him: young black men facing harsh sentences for minor offenses, police testimony that didn't quite add up, and evidence that seemed selectively gathered. He tried to address it through proper channels, through careful questioning and measured rulings, maintaining the delicate balance between justice and institutional stability. His daily routine had become a carefully choreographed dance: morning coffee with Denise, the drive to the courthouse in his Lexus, 9 hours of hearings and deliberations, and then the quiet drive home through the familiar streets of Winterdale. But tonight's traffic stop was about to shatter that routine, forcing Samuel to confront the reality that even a black man in a judge's robes wasn't immune to the systemic prejudices he'd spent his career trying to change from within. License and registration. Officer RHS's voice cut through the evening air, sharp and cold as winter frost. Samuel reached for his credentials with deliberate slowness, decades of unspoken rules for black men during traffic stops running through his mind: no sudden movements, maintain eye contact, keep your hands visible. "Of course, officer," he said, voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "I'm Judge Samuel Carr. I live just 3 blocks from here on Oak Hill Drive." He handed over his license and registration, documents that should have ended this stop before it began. RHS snatched the papers without acknowledging his words, her flashlight beam harsh against the leather interior of his Lexus. Her free hand still hovered near her weapon, a silent threat that made Samuel's jaw clench. Through his side mirror, he could see curtains twitching in nearby homes, his neighbors, watching one of their town's most respected judicial figures being treated like a common criminal. "Step out of the vehicle," RHS ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. "Officer, there must be some misunderstanding. If you check those documents..." "I said step out of the vehicle. Now." Her hand moved closer to her holster. The humiliation burned hot in Samuel's throat as he slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. Everything in his legal training screamed against this violation of his rights, but 20 years on the bench had taught him that justice and law enforcement weren't always aligned. He opened the door with careful precision. "Hands where I can see them," RHS barked. "On the hood." Samuel complied, the cool metal of his new Lexus pressing against his palms. The same car he'd bought to celebrate 2 decades of service to this community was now being used to publicly humiliate him. He could feel more eyes watching from behind curtained windows, more neighbors witnessing his degradation. "We've had reports of a vehicle matching this description being stolen," RHS said, beginning to pat him down with rough, invasive movements. "Can't be too careful." "This is my car, Officer RHS," Samuel replied, struggling to keep his voice level. "I purchased it last week. The dealership can confirm." "Quiet," she snapped, continuing her search. "You're being difficult for someone with nothing to hide." The irony of her words wasn't lost on Samuel. How many times had he heard similar testimony in his courtroom? How many times had he given police officers the benefit of the doubt when they used phrases like that to justify their actions? The crackle of a radio broke the tension. "Unit 47, come in." RHS stepped back, keeping her eyes on Samuel as she responded. "Unit 47 here. Stand down immediately." The voice belonged to Captain Reynolds, head of the Winterdale Police Department. "Judge Carr is a respected member of this community. I'm en route to your location now." Samuel watched RHS's face flush with embarrassment as recognition finally dawned. She lowered her radio, her earlier confidence crumbling. I apologize, Your Honor. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Samuel repeated softly, straightening his jacket. "Is that what we're calling racial profiling now, officer?" Before RHS could respond, another patrol car pulled up, and Captain Reynolds emerged, his face etched with concern. "Judge Carr," he called out, hurrying over. "I cannot begin to apologize enough for this incident. Rest assured, we'll get to the bottom of this." But Samuel barely heard him. His mind was already racing ahead, seeing this incident not as an isolated mistake but as a symptom of a deeper disease. How many other black men had Officer RHS stopped like this? How many didn't have the protection of a judge's title? How many had faced worse outcomes because they lacked his credentials and connections? As Captain Reynolds continued his apologies and RHS stood awkwardly by her patrol car, Samuel made a decision. He'd spent years working within the system, believing he could effect change through careful, measured actions from the bench. But this incident had shattered that illusion. It was time to confront the corruption and prejudice that ran through Winterdale's institutions, even if it meant risking everything he'd built. 3 days after the traffic stop, Samuel sat in his chambers reviewing Officer RHS's personnel file. His friend Aaron, a veteran detective in the department's Internal Affairs Division, had slipped it to him quietly. The file painted a disturbing picture: 6 complaints of racial profiling in the past year alone, all mysteriously marked resolved, with no disciplinary action. "This goes deeper than one officer," Aaron said, leaning against Samuel's desk. His dark eyes carried the weary look of someone who'd spent too long watching a system rot from within. "Every time I start investigating these complaints, they get buried. Someone up top is protecting them." Samuel rubbed his temples, studying a pattern that was becoming clearer with each passing hour. "Captain Reynolds was awfully quick to show up that night. Almost like he was expecting trouble." "Reynolds is connected," Aaron replied, lowering his voice. "Apex Builders has him in their pocket. That new development project they're pushing through? The one displacing half of the East Side community? Reynolds makes sure their permits go through without inspection, their violations disappear." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lisa Chin, a producer from the local news station, entered with purpose in her stride. Samuel had reached out to her after the incident, trusting her reputation for investigative integrity. "Judge Carr," she said, pulling out her tablet. "I've been doing some digging. Those complaints against RHS? They're not just disappearing, they're being actively suppressed. I've got sources saying Apex Builders has been paying off senior officers to maintain what they call aggressive enforcement in certain neighborhoods." Samuel's blood ran cold. The same neighborhoods where they're buying up property. Exactly. Lisa nodded. They're using the police to intimidate residents, drive down property values. Then they swoop in and buy everything at rock-bottom prices. But here's where it gets interesting. The money trail doesn't stop at the police department. She pulled up a complex web of financial transactions, shell companies, and suspicious donations. At the center of it all was Apex Builders, their tentacles reaching into every corner of Winterdale's power structure. City council members, zoning officials, even judges. Aaron muttered, studying the diagram. This isn't just corruption, it's systematic oppression. Samuel stood, pacing behind his desk. The weight of what they were uncovering pressed down on him like a physical force. We need more evidence. Something concrete that ties it all together. I can help, Aaron offered. But we need to be careful. These people, they play for keeps. One wrong move, and we'll all be in danger. As if to emphasize his point, Samuel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, Judge. Some doors should stay closed. The threats escalated quickly after that. Samuel's home security system reported mysterious failures. Strange cars began appearing outside his house, following Denise to work. One morning, he found his judicial robes slashed to ribbons, a warning left on his chamber door. You need to step back, Denise pleaded one night after another threatening call had disrupted their dinner. Let someone else fight this battle. But Samuel couldn't step back. Each day brought new evidence of the corruption's reach. A young black man was sentenced to 10 years for a crime he couldn't have committed. An elderly woman was evicted from her home of 40 years based on falsified violations. Each case bore the fingerprints of Apex Builders and their police enforcers. Working late one evening, Aaron burst into Samuel's chambers, his face pale. They're onto us. Someone broke into my apartment, and tossed the place. They're looking for our evidence. Samuel opened his desk drawer, revealing a small recording device. Then it's time we give them something to find. I've been wearing this during meetings with Reynolds. Yesterday, he tried to bribe me, offered to make things easier if I'd play ball. Lisa arrived minutes later, reviewing the recording with growing excitement. This is it. The smoking gun. Reynolds explicitly connects sex to the police department's targeting of minority neighborhoods. We can break this story wide open. It won't be that simple, Aaron warned. They'll try to discredit us, maybe worse. You've seen what they're capable of. Samuel thought of Denise, of their life in Winterdale, of everything they stood to lose. But he also thought of Officer RHS's hand on her weapon, of countless other black men and women who didn't have his power or position to protect them. We move forward, he decided. Lisa, prepare the story. Aaron, get your evidence somewhere safe. I'll keep pressure on Reynolds from my end. They think being a judge makes me part of their system. Time to show them what justice means. That night, Samuel returned home to find his garage door wide open, his new Lexus's windows shattered. Another message waited on his phone. Last warning, Judge. Even robes won't stop bullets. Denise was waiting inside, her face tight with worry. I saw them, she said. 2 men in a black SUV. They watched me all day at the hospital. Samuel pulled her close, feeling her trembling. We can still walk away, he whispered, though they both knew he didn't mean it. No. Denise straightened, steel entering her voice. You taught me that justice isn't just about making the right decisions in court. It's about standing up when the system fails. Whatever happens, we face it together. The next morning, Samuel walked into his courtroom knowing everything was about to change. Lisa's story was ready to air. Aaron had secured their evidence with state authorities. The pieces were in place. As he took his seat at the bench, Samuel noticed Officer RHS in the gallery, her eyes boring into him. Captain Reynolds sat nearby, his face a mask of false concern. They thought they had him cornered, that fear would keep him in line. But they had miscalculated. Samuel Carr hadn't become a judge to preserve a corrupt system. He had done it to change it. As he opened the first case of the day, he knew the real battle was just beginning. The time for measured responses and careful negotiations was over. Winterdale's day of reckoning was about to begin. The morning Lisa's story was set to air, Aaron's apartment was found ransacked. His laptop was missing, along with files documenting years of police misconduct. Samuel rushed to the scene, finding his friend sitting among the wreckage, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "They came at dawn," Aaron said, voice shaking. "3 of them. Reynolds' squad. Said they were doing a wellness check." He laughed bitterly. "They took everything, Samuel. Years of evidence." "Not everything," Samuel replied, helping Aaron to his feet. "The copies we sent to the state attorney's office are safe. And they don't know about the offshore server." A text lit up Samuel's phone. "Your friend got lucky. Next time he won't walk away." Lisa arrived minutes later, her face ashen. "They hit the station too. Someone destroyed our servers and wiped the story. But I was ready for them." She held up a flash drive. "Backup copies went to every major network in the country. They can't stop all of us." The story broke like a tsunami. Security footage showed Captain Reynolds accepting envelopes from Apex executives. Internal emails revealed systematic targeting of minority neighborhoods. Bank records traced millions in bribes through shell companies. Reynolds appeared on local news that evening, denouncing Samuel as a rogue judge, with a personal vendetta against law enforcement. But his carefully crafted image cracked under pressure. When questioned about specific transactions, he stormed off camera. The next morning, Samuel found his chambers sealed with crime scene tape. An anonymous tip had reported drugs hidden in his office. The subsequent search found nothing, but the message was clear: they could destroy his reputation at will. "You need protection," Denise insisted that night after another brick shattered their living room window. "They're not just threatening anymore. They're taking action." Before Samuel could respond, his phone rang. Joseph Martinez, from the State Attorney General's office, had urgent news. "We've got a problem, Samuel. Someone's been tampering with court records, inserting evidence of judicial misconduct under your name. They're building a case to remove you from the bench." Samuel's mind raced. "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe hours. But listen, there's more. We've uncovered connections between Apex and state officials. This goes higher than Winterdale. They've been using the same playbook across multiple jurisdictions." A pounding at the front door interrupted them. Through the security camera, Samuel saw Officer RHS with a warrant in hand. Behind her, Reynolds smiled coldly. "Judge Carr," RHS called out. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Corruption charges. Open the door." Samuel ended the call, his heart hammering. In the kitchen, Denise already had their emergency bag ready. They'd planned for this, but the reality was still shocking. "The back door," Samuel whispered. "Aaron's waiting 2 blocks away." As they slipped into the darkness, flashlight beams cut through their yard. Police radios crackled with coordinates. The hunt was on. Aaron's car idled in a shadowy driveway, engine silent. They made it barely 50 yards before patrol cars screamed around both ends of the street, trapping them. "It's over, Judge," Reynolds' voice boomed through a megaphone. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." But Reynolds had underestimated them again. Lisa's van burst from a side street, blocking the patrol cars. Aaron gunned the engine, cutting across a lawn as camera crews emerged from the van, capturing every moment of the police pursuit of a respected judge. "They can't arrest you now," Lisa's voice crackled through Aaron's radio. "Not with the whole country watching. We're streaming live." They made it to the state attorney's office, where Joseph waited with a team of investigators. The evidence was overwhelming: falsified warrants, manufactured evidence, and witness intimidation. Reynolds' entire operation was unraveling. But in a private conference room, Joseph delivered the hardest blow. "We've identified the judge who signed off on your arrest warrant. Douglas Chin. He's been on Apex's payroll for years." Samuel felt the weight of betrayal. Chin had been his mentor, the man who'd inspired him to become a judge. How deep does this go? Deep enough that they're willing to kill to keep it quiet, Aaron said, showing them a message on his phone. Security footage from his apartment, showing the officers planting evidence, had been found in a dumpster. The officer who discovered it was now in intensive care. Samuel looked at Denise and saw the fear and determination in her eyes. They'd known exposing corruption would be dangerous, but this was war. The system wasn't just broken, it was actively attacking anyone who tried to fix it. What do we do now? Denise asked softly. Samuel squared his shoulders. We finish this. Not just for Winterdale, but for every city where Apex has poisoned the system. Reynolds, Chin, all of them, they're going down. As if in answer, every phone in the room buzzed simultaneously. A final warning. Last chance, Judge. Walk away, or the next warrant won't be for arrest. The crisis had reached its peak. In the next 24 hours, either justice would prevail, or everything Samuel had fought for would be buried forever, along with anyone brave enough to stand with him. The news station's backup generator hummed as Lisa's team prepared for the broadcast. They'd lost power twice already, equipment failures, that reeked of sabotage. Samuel watched the technical crew triple-check every connection, knowing they had one shot at this. Satellite feed is secure, Lisa announced, her fingers flying over a keyboard. They can't shut us down this time. We're broadcasting simultaneously to 12 different networks. Aaron burst through the door, clutching a manila envelope. You need to see this now. He spread photos across the desk, surveillance shots of Samuel's house, Denise at the hospital, and their regular routes to work. These were in Reynolds' safe. They've been watching for months. Samuel's phone buzzed. Reynolds. Think carefully about what you're about to do, Judge. Your wife works late at that hospital. Lots of dark parking lots. They're desperate, Samuel said, showing the others. Which means we've got them cornered. Denise called next. Someone just broke into my office. They took my laptop, but... She paused, voice steady despite her fear. They won't find anything. I moved all the files last week. Outside, police sirens wailed closer. Through the station windows, Samuel spotted 3 patrol cars blocking the exits. Officer RHS stepped out of one, adjusting her weapon. Reynolds is calling in every favor, Aaron said, checking his phone. Judge Chin just signed warrants for all of us. Obstruction of justice, conspiracy, evidence tampering. The same charges they're guilty of. Lisa's team worked faster, racing against time. The evidence was overwhelming. Documents showing Apex's systematic corruption of the police force, their manipulation of property values through targeted harassment, the judges and officials on their payroll. Everything needed to tear down the corrupt empire they built. 10 minutes to broadcast, Lisa announced. Once we start, they can't stop it. Samuel's phone lit up again, Joseph from the state attorney's office. State police are en route, but Reynolds has roadblocks on every major artery into Winterdale. They're trying to buy time. Through the windows, more patrol cars arrived. Reynolds himself stepped out of an unmarked SUV, straightening his badge with practiced authority. His voice boomed through a megaphone. This is your final warning. Come out now, or we're coming in. 5 minutes, Lisa called out. Aaron checked his weapon, positioning himself by the door. They'll try to breach before we go live. If they get through. They won't, Samuel interrupted. Reynolds wants to shut us down quietly. A violent raid on a news station, caught on camera? Even he's not that reckless. But Reynolds proved him wrong. Glass shattered as tear gas canisters crashed through the windows. Officers in riot gear approached the building. 2 minutes! Denise's voice came through Samuel's phone. State police just broke through the roadblock. They're 3 minutes out. Too late, Aaron said, watching officers attach breaching charges to the station's main doors. 60 seconds, Lisa shouted over the chaos. Feeds are connected. Servers locked. They can't stop it now. Reynolds' voice echoed through the building. Breach in 30 seconds. Samuel faced the camera as Lisa counted down. Everything had led to this moment. All the threats, the corruption, the abuse of power, it was about to end. 10 seconds! The breaching charges detonated as Lisa pointed at Samuel. The broadcast was live. There was no turning back now. Good evening, Winterdale. Samuel spoke directly into the camera as chaos erupted around him. I'm Judge Samuel Carr, and what you're about to witness isn't just a story of corruption, it's happening right now. The breach charges exploded, filling the studio with smoke. Through the haze, viewers across the country watched armed officers storm in, led by Captain Reynolds himself. Captain Reynolds, Samuel continued calmly, who's currently attempting to silence this broadcast, received over $2 million from Apex Builders last year alone. The evidence is scrolling across your screen right now. Reynolds froze, realizing that millions were watching his raid live. Officer RHS lowered her weapon, uncertainty crossing her face as bank records, signed documents, and surveillance photos filled every screen. For years, this department has terrorized our communities on Apex's orders, Samuel declared. They've falsified evidence, buried complaints, and threatened anyone who dared to speak up. Including me. State police sirens wailed outside. Joseph burst in with a team of state troopers, weapons drawn. Captain Reynolds, he shouted, you and your officers are under arrest. Drop your weapons! Reynolds reached for his gun, but Aaron was faster. In one swift motion, he disarmed the captain, ending the corrupt officer's reign with a pair of handcuffs. This isn't just Winterdale's problem, Samuel continued, as Reynolds was led away. Apex Builders has corrupted police departments in 12 cities. The evidence has already been delivered to federal authorities. Officer RHS stepped forward, removing her badge. I want to make a statement, she said, facing the camera. Everything the judge is saying is true. I was ordered to target specific residents to create fear. I'm ready to testify. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Judge Chin confessed to signing illegal warrants. City council members admitted to taking bribes. Apex's executives were led out of their offices in handcuffs, their empire crumbling in real time on national television. But it was the final piece of evidence that sealed their fate. Lisa played the recording of Reynolds threatening Denise, followed by footage of the attack on Aaron's apartment. The systematic intimidation campaign was exposed for all to see. This ends tonight, Samuel concluded, his voice steady with conviction. Not just in Winterdale, but everywhere corrupt officials think they're above the law. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall. 6 months after the broadcast, Samuel stood in his restored chambers, reviewing applications for the new Civilian Oversight Committee. The changes in Winterdale had been swift and profound. Reynolds and 12 other officers faced federal charges. Judge Chin had resigned in disgrace. Apex Builders executives were awaiting trial, their assets frozen. Officer RHS's testimony sparked a wave of reform across multiple police departments. She now worked with the Oversight Committee, helping to identify and eliminate discriminatory practices. The traffic stop that had started it all had become a case study in police reform training programs nationwide. Aaron had been promoted to head of internal affairs, where he worked to rebuild trust between the police and the community. Lisa's coverage of the scandal had earned her a Pulitzer nomination, but she remained in Winterdale, committed to keeping power in check. Denise knocked on Samuel's chamber door, entering with purpose. The first group of displaced residents are moving back today, she announced. The city's lawsuit against Apex recovered enough money to restore their homes. Samuel smiled, remembering the elderly woman who'd been evicted. She would sleep in her bed tonight, her neighborhood slowly healing from years of targeted harassment. Was it worth it? Denise asked softly, noting the gray hairs Samuel had earned during their fight. Before he could answer, a young black lawyer appeared in the doorway, one of many who'd been inspired by Samuel's stand against corruption. Your Honor? The new class of judicial clerks is here for orientation. Samuel took Denise's hand, squeezing it gently. It was worth everything, he said. Because now they'll know justice isn't just a word we hang on courthouse walls. It's something worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Together, they walked toward the courtroom where the next generation of legal defenders waited, ready to learn that true justice requires more than just following the law. It demands the courage to stand up when that law is corrupted by those sworn to uphold it. If this story of justice and corruption in Winterdale kept you riveted, don't miss our next explosive investigation. Hit subscribe and activate notifications to follow more stories of courage in the face of systemic corruption. Join our community of readers who believe in holding power accountable. What would you have done in Judge Carr's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and join the discussion about police reform and judicial integrity. Your voice matters in the ongoing conversation about justice in our communities.